Hello everyone, welcome to the program. This is Politics Today, live on Channels Television. I'm Shomwa Kimale here in Abuja. So much updates that we have for you tonight on the program in respect of Rivers State. And I probably will give you some insight on a deal that should concern a lot of Nigerians. Beyond the politics that we have seen, we need to start talking about the real issues in Nigeria regarding food security. I'm bringing you up close and personal with someone who is in the know about just how we can secure food in Nigeria and the deal that Nigeria signed with Brazil, though that multi-billion-dollar deal. How do we go about it? Enough of the politics, we need to face some realities at some point. But I will dig and also touch on the River State matter for you tonight. So, Paul, first and foremost, let me take you to Kogi State, where some constituents we have seen in the past days are gathering, and they've started the recall process against Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, citing a vote of no confidence in her representation. The recall process witnessed in some parts of the senatorial district saw a large number of electorates on the queue to register their support for the recall process. However, there are agitations and protests seen on the street against the recall process, where women and other constituents are taken to the street to campaign against what they describe as political manipulation to force the lawmaker out of the National Assembly. Meanwhile, today, we are hearing Ebira indigents from across the 5 local government areas of Kogi Central who have strongly condemned claims that the recall process against Senator Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan lacks the endorsement of the majority of the electorate. In a statement signed by the President and Secretary of the Kogi Central Elites Forum, Alhaji Ibrahim Abdulaziz Ibrahim and Prince Akerejola Johnson, the constituent reaffirmed their commitment to bringing the embattled senator back home. They cited what they describe as an international embarrassment caused by our actions, adding that the recall was a collective decision and not sponsored by any individual or group. The forum dismissed insinuations that the recall process was manipulated, emphasizing that the Ebira people cannot be deceived. They accused the senator of engaging in propaganda and misrepresenting facts, particularly regarding our refusal to take our assigned seat in the Senate, which they said led to an unnecessary controversy. On the Independent National Electoral Commission stance, they clarified that INEC's role begins only after the signature collection phase is completed. The group urged the public to disregard misrepresentations of the recall, insisting that Senator Akpoti-Uduaghan must return home to learn the rudiments of lawmaking. Meanwhile, in all of these, there are issues or allegations regarding how the National Assembly is grappling with the sexual harassment against Senate President Godswill Akpabio following the Senate's dispute over Senate rules. We have some other stories for you, then I'll bring my guest tonight for you after these political roundup stories.
The Minister of Interior, Mr. Olubunmi Tunji-Ojo, and the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ambassador Yusuf Tuga, have been giving updates on the efforts of the current administration. The two ministers were the latest to feature at the 2025 Ministerial Briefing Series, organized by the Minister of Information and National Orientation, Mr. Mohammed Idris. Mr. Idris reaffirmed the federal government's commitment to upholding the constitutionally granted rights of all Nigerians, including the rights to free speech and healthy opposition.
Highlights the government's commitment to accountability. It equally serves as a platform to keep Nigerians informed about the ongoing policies and programs of the Tinubu administration, to foster active citizens' engagement in the nation's governance process.
The Taraba State government has cleared the air on the status of the Deputy Governor of the state, Mr. Aminu Alkali, who has been away from office since November of 2024. In a press briefing shortly after the State Executive Council meeting, the State Commissioner for Information, Mr. Zainab Jalingo, revealed that the Deputy Governor has a medical condition that has affected his capacity to perform official duties. She, however, states that Mr. Alkali is recuperating and will soon resume duty. The South-South Governors Forum has expressed concern over the recent declaration of a state of emergency in Rivers State and the suspension of 2 democratic institutions, calling for reconsideration of the decision. In an official statement signed by its chairman, Governor Doyediri of Bayelsa State, the forum acknowledged the president's constitutional responsibility to maintain law and order across the country, but questioned whether the situation in Rivers State meets the constitutional threshold for such a declaration. Meanwhile, the governor of Edo State, Mr. Monde Okpebolo, has dissociated himself from the position of the South-South Governors Forum on the declaration of the state of emergency in Rivers State by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. In a statement signed by the Chief Press Secretary to the governor, Mr. Fred Itwa, Governor Okpebolo acknowledges the right of other governors in the South-South geopolitical zone to take a position, but he insisted that the president understands the issues at stake, which is the reason the president declared a state of emergency in Rivers State. Traditional rulers from the Niger Delta region are calling for a peaceful dialogue to address grievances rather than resorting to threats of destroying critical oil and gas assets in the region. The monarchs, under the Association of Niger Delta Monarchs of Nigeria, made this call during a one-day interactive session in Port Harcourt, focusing on the presidential amnesty program, pipeline surveillance, and the energy sector.
During the presidential inauguration in May 2023, a key policy initiative of Mr. President was the removal of subsidy on petroleum products. As much as the policy was geared towards economic liberalization and focused development, a major driver to guarantee its success was the stability in oil exploration, production, and distribution.
The national chairman of the Labour Party, Mr. Julius Abure, has pledged a free, fair and credible election ahead of the forthcoming party primaries for the Anambra State governorship election. The national chairman also said Nigeria would get better only when an honest process of leadership recruitment is enthroned. He stated this position when one of the party's aspirants, Mr. George Morgalu, paid a courtesy visit to the National Working Committee of the party in Abuja.
I want to say clearly, without fear of contradiction, and I want to be challenged with this statement tomorrow, that there won't be godfatherism. We have no anointed candidate in Labour Party.
There you have it, everyone. You've been served with your political roundup stories, and you are now up to date. Let's begin tonight, first and foremost, with the Rivers State matter, which has grabbed the headlines for the past day. So, a lot of people have expected, just as the Constitution has stipulated, that when the National Assembly is in session, 2 days, that the National Assembly must consider the proclamation of a state of emergency by Nigerian president. So, today made the second day, just after 2 days ago when President Bola Tinubu on Tuesday declared a state of emergency in Rivers State. So the House of Representatives voted in support of the declaration of a state of emergency in the state, in a move that has split Nigerians and has continued to attract a lot of criticism. President Bola Tinubu, when declared a state of emergency, gave a reason for what has become a necessity and being enshrined and what is empowered in, according to the Constitution in Section 305, subsection 5. Today on the floor of the Green Chambers, there were dissension. Let me allow you to listen to part of what happened on the floor of the Green Chambers today.
This is not about either supporting or opposing what Mr. President has said, but because of your impeccable leadership, the kind of leadership you have given to us in this House, and the kind of leadership that Nigerians have come to believe in, Mr. Speaker, it is good enough, and I urge you that we comply strictly with the Constitution by first transparently announcing the quorum as it is now for us to go into this debate. I so move, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for the opportunity.
We are not yet at the point of voting. So the point of voting, what are being raised, until we get to the point of voting, that is when possibly that clause could be asked. But for now, we are supposed to consider what is before us, and what is before us is the request by Mr. President to tackle the issue or to approve for him for rivers. Until we get to that one before we now begin to talk about quorum.
Any more contributions? So we put the question. Are we ready for the question? Are we ready? Those in support of this request of Mr. President as amended should say aye. Aye. Those in support of this request from Mr. President as amended should say aye. Those against should say nay. There is have it. Thank you very much. I want the House to note that today's plenary is being attended by 243 members based on our attendance registers. Just for records, we have more than satisfied the requirement of this particular amendment.
This is one of the moments where the Constitution requires a concurrence. That means the agreement between the two chambers of the National Assembly, just like we saw in the House of Representatives. The Senate in the Red Chamber approved President Bola Tinubu's proclamation of a state of emergency in Rivers State, invoking his constitutional powers under the Amendment 1999 Constitution. So the approval grants President Tinubu's authority to enforce emergency measures while mandating a review of the situation at any time. But of course, just like we saw in the House of Reps, a similar dissension also came from an opposition lawmaker and the former governor of Bayelsa State, Senator Seriake Dixon, which is he was asking basically for some kind of amendment in the prayers before the question was put on the floor. Take a listen to how all went down in the Senate today.
Just a point of order. It's not. It doesn't stop your. Doesn't stop the motion.
The same Senator Seriake Dixon.
Yes.
I watch you on television.
Mr. President, I have
and
a point of order for which
listen to me now.
Yes.
Let's not argue. If we argue, it won't be good for any of us. We are all distinguished people. You are a former governor, I'm a former governor. Let us, please, all of them, Mike, sit down. Please be seated. I watch you on television. And you said no matter what the Senate does, the Senate will not have your vote on anything the Senate does. That's what you said on television. I don't know, but I'm saying that if you have already made up your mind to go and talk on television when the Senate has not even considered any issue, I want to let you know.
To me, please.
I'm not arguing with you. I'm only saying please allow me to preside. Allow me to preside.
Make my point.
Stand up and make a point.
I wanted to draw your attention, Mr. President, respectfully, and the attention of all our colleagues, to the specific provisions of our rules. Order 135. The framers of this order are very exhaustive.
Your point of order is upheld.
Thank you.
The back and forth between both men, the former governors of Bayelsa and Akwa Ibom State, who are now sitting in the National Assembly, one as a floor member, the other as a presiding officer. At the end of the day, the prayers was put, and this is how the senators voted on the state of emergency in Rivers State.
The Senate resolved as follows. 1. The Senate invokes the powers conferred on it by Section 305, subsection 2 of the 1999 Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria as amended, and approve the proclamation of state of emergency declared by Mr. President in Rivers State of Nigeria. The Senate further directs that the declaration of the state of emergency stated in the proclamation document and the mandate of Mr. President to review, and hereby mandates the President to review and even to terminate the state of emergency at any given time, but not later than 6 months.
That was how it all went down in the two chambers of the National Assembly, and the requirement for the imposition of a state of emergency as prescribed by the Constitution, Section 305, subsection 5, which empowers the president in the absence of the governor of the state in seeking a state of emergency as provided in Section 4, subsection 4 of the Section 305 of the Constitution is now put in place. There is a big question which I'll bring you to. But let me bring you to perspective now. The analysis of what it requires to get the National Assembly to assent or to approve the president's decision to declare a state of emergency. According to Section 305, subsection 5 and subsection 6, there is a particular number that is required for the National Assembly to have, and it's 2/3. In the Senate, there are 109 senators, and it is required for them to have a 2/3. And this is what it will look like in the Senate and in the House of Representatives, where we have 360. In the Senate, you need the minimum of 73 to make a 2/3. Well, if you round up the figures, because 109, if you do the mathematics, it might bring you to about 73. But in the House of Representatives, it will require about 240 to be able to get 2/3. These were the arguments that the lawmakers were having to say, what is the quorum to be able to vote in upon this kind of question as posed by the presiding officer in the National Assembly? 243, that's what the Speaker says they have. Did they have that kind of 2/3 in the Senate? That's a big question. Put that aside. On the other hand, what is the procedure of voting? Is it by voice vote or by other kind of voting that we have seen as prescribed by the rules stipulated by the National Assembly? These are very big questions that a lot of Nigerians are asking, but there are a lot of people who are already reacting to these issues. Former Vice President, alongside some opposition leaders in the country, today held a press conference and asking Nigerians to reject the position of President Bola Tinubu. Take a listen to former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, as well as a former APC member, former governor of Kaduna State, Nasir El-Rufai. They held a press conference earlier today in Abuja.
We have come together to address the dangerous and unconstitutional actions taken by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu on March 18, 2025, to wit, the declaration of state of emergency in Rivers State and the illegal suspension of the democratically elected governor, deputy governor in the State House of Assembly. This action is not only unlawful, but also a clear subversion of democracy and imposition of autocratic federal control over a duly elected state government. Without any doubt, the Nigerian Constitution does not empower the president to remove an elected governor, deputy governor, or state assembly under any circumstances. Now, ladies and gentlemen, our demand and call to action. Number one, immediate reversal. We call on President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to immediately revoke this unconstitutional proclamation and reinstate the elected governor, deputy governor, and state assembly of Rivers State. We call on patriotic senators and representatives
the former self were a part of. And it is true that in those cases the governors were suspended. These suspensions were challenged in the courts, and in 2006 the Supreme Court of Nigeria gave a judgment clearly stating that even though by then Daria had been restored to office, but lashed the Obasanjo administration and said that under no circumstances would the emergency provisions in Section 305 be used to remove any elected official. That is the law. The Supreme Court has spoken. No legislation or constitutional amendment has changed that. So that is the law. No one, no person or authority can remove an elected official, whether governor, deputy governor, or member of the legislature.
Those are the positions of the opposition leaders earlier today in Abuja and what they have asked the president to do. Meanwhile, the president has saluted the National Assembly members, calling their action today in approving the state of emergency declaration as patriotic and stand on River State emergency proclamation, saying that the consent and the handling of the lawmakers' diligent review of classified security briefings is excellent. Well, we're hearing also from the chairman of the APC Governors Forum, the Progressive Governors Forum, Governor Hope Uzodinma of Imo State. He said himself and his group have not met, but as a chair of the APC Governors Forum, he says that he supports President Bola Tinubu's position to declare the state of emergency in Rivers. So don't forget what happened with the South-South governors who have condemned President Bola Tinubu's action. The governor of Edo State, Monday Okpebolo, has said he's not in support of what his colleagues in the South-South have said, and he's backing the president. Let's listen to what Governor of Imo State and the chair of the APC Governors Forum had to say.
The president was very proactive, and his actions are very commendable, and I'm sure it is to the best interest of the country that prevention, they say, is better than cure. You can imagine what would have happened if the impeachment went ahead, and there would be actions and reactions leading to violence and all sorts of manners of things.
The chairman of the APC's Governors Forum, Progressive Governors Forum, Governor Hope Uzodinma of Imo State, he said himself and the colleague have not met, but yet, as a chair, is speaking on behalf of his colleague and saying, look, whatever the president's done is right. Let's get some perspective on this one. Tonight, I'm being joined by an elder statesman, a farmer, if you call him that, a former minister of agriculture, a former minister in several sense. He was the chairman, the national chairman of the People's Democratic Party between 2001 and 2005. I'm being joined by Chief Audu Ogbe. It's live for us here tonight. Thank you so much, Your Excellency, and thank you indeed for creating time to speak with us. Let me begin with what is being. I know that you perhaps have gotten yourself in the line of fire when you were PDP chairman under Obasanjo, and there are references to Obasanjo and former President Obasanjo and the issues of state of emergency. In Ekiti, we saw it. In Plateau State, we saw what happened. In Oyo State, in the days of Adedibu, in the days of Alawa Akala, and what happened with former Governor Ladoja. But in all of this, there are references that are being made. And there are those who are asking the question, legitimately or not, constitutional or not, the decision of President Bola Tinubu, what is your view on that stance?
Thank you very much for inviting me to your program. I think that the use of states or declarations of states of emergency is something that we should avoid as much as possible. And to do so is like setting up a fire brigade to make sure the fire doesn't even happen, not to rush machines around, because by the time the machines arrive to put out the fire, some damage must have been done. It's a very dangerous trend because it is definitely not going to be always fair and just. It will always leave a bitter taste in the mouths of those affected, and a certain sense of victory and triumph in the minds of those who think they have won. Now, in a country where ethnicity is a serious matter, and where we need to be a bit cautious what we do, I think that provision may be very interesting to read. It's something we should apply only very sparingly. That's my reaction.
If you look at it, in the circumstance, there are those who had knocked the president for his decision. There are those who had praised the president But do you think it has gotten, because what the provision of the Constitution, or what the Constitution says, is when the part of the country is in a state of imminent danger. What we saw in Ekiti, what we saw in Oyo State, what we saw in Plateau State, under former President Obasanjo, can you compare it with what we saw, what we are seeing, or what we're seeing in Rivers State? Do you think that the manner of the proclamation is commensurate to perhaps what has happened in Rivers State this time around?
Well, on each of these occasions, I was chairman of the party. The president had more information than I had, and therefore making comments on how precarious he thought the situation was at the time would be difficult for me. What I think we should do, and I think that after this one, we must avoid the use of this provision as much as possible. I think that the president is a well-informed enough individual, a powerful enough person to organize groups of persons within the states with sufficient moral and social authority to sit down and try to resolve some of these issues before they get to the point of proclamations of states of emergency. The reason I'm saying this is that we all know that the ethnic tinderbox in Nigeria is very easy to inflame. We don't want fights. We don't want riots. We don't want assassinations. Now, when these problems begin, in fairness to the president, he did call the Rivers State gentleman to the villa once. That didn't seem to work. Now, some people are asking, why is the situation such that only the governor and the deputy and the others in the House are being affected? That perhaps, and which is what I will endorse, we should have, as soon as possible, even before the 6 months pass, the president should find solid individuals in Rivers State, men and women and youths, to sit down and ask them to mediate in this matter and find out exactly where the problems lay. And appeal to particularly the two persons who appear to be the worrying individuals, that Rivers State is bigger than any individual. And we as a country and as countrymen are not interested in watching a situation where Rivers State, in fact, the entire Niger Delta will go up in flames. Nigeria has lived off the Niger Delta for 40 years. And we appreciate what they've done for Nigeria because of their oil that has been fueling our expenditure. Nobody wants a crisis in Niger Delta. Nobody wants a crisis anywhere, indeed. But when these things begin, the president should set up people in his party, elders, youths, women, to sit down and confront these individuals and tell them point blank, you cannot go on this way because you are endangering the plight of the nation. Now, when the matter comes before the National Assembly for voting, I would like to suggest to the National Assemblymen to install a capacity in future for individual voting, which they can print out, not ayes and nays, because someday, 10 to 20 years from now, their children and grandchildren and researchers would like to find out how individuals voted on a particular bill. It could be the abortion bill or the bill on capital punishment or something. Ayes and nays do not give us a clear picture of the position and the moral authority of individual senators or members of the House. And nobody should hide under a shadow. If you want the vote, say so. If you don't want it, say so. But these ayes and nays, it's a camouflage. And it doesn't work. I was a deputy speaker of the House of Assembly in Benue State between 1979 and 1982. So if issues like that came up, we wanted to know who stood in what position and who we could count. That's my position.
So, are you worried? Because there are those who say the Constitution is silent on whether the president can suspend or suspend any elected members, as the case is in the case of Governor Similayo Fubara and Mrs. Ojo and the House of Assembly members. What worries you the most about the action of suspending a sitting governor? Because this is what also worried the likes of Atiku Abubakar and Nasir El-Rufai.
Well, I must say that the decision of the president should not overrule the vote of the people who made that individual governor. The people of Rivers voted somebody. The people of Plateau voted somebody. If that person is not doing the right thing, is it morally right for an individual to have the authority to remove him from office? That's something that the nation should debate, and that's something that needs to be amended or corrected.
What would you say in the situation that we find ourselves? Because some members of the National Assembly are asking for a mediation, that a mediation committee should be set up. But you heard what the president said. He said both parties have ignored his counsel. He does leave the president like a helpless one. But those who have criticized him to say, you've taken political power from one party and you've retained political power from the other party that is involved. In your own sense, as an elder statesman, how do you think that the president should have handled this for those who have accused him of bias in this matter?
A president is a man that should have sympathy. The job of president is subhuman, it's a superhuman assignment. I mean, that man, every day of the week, must be aging like a month because of the kinds of problems that come before him. So sometimes it's almost impossible to imagine the pressure he goes through. However, I was going to suggest that as soon as possible, a reconciliation committee should be set up. And that in future, when such a situation arises, these individuals who are in the warring factions should be brought before senior citizens of the state and told the plain truth. There's always somebody who is doing far more or far less than he or she should. And there's always somebody who is too aggressive for the rest of the crowd. I think the people of Rivers, senior citizens, men and women, should have the courage to say to such a person, if you did this, it's wrong. If you didn't do that, it is wrong. But removing an elected person, one person having the authority to remove one person from office is something that may not exactly rhyme with with democratic ideals. Because that's to say that after an election, the archbishop of the state, or the chief imam of the state, or the oldest traditional ruler there can say to the governor, we don't want you anymore, and he packs his luggage and goes. After all, the president did not vote in his state. So that's something that we need to look after, or look into.
I mean,
it's a very tricky matter.
And those who are very critical of the president, who says, look, he's an enabler for political gains of the other party involved in this matter. If the president said, look, both parties have ignored him, there are those also who are asking the question, at least you have power over one that you are principal of. Compared to another that you don't have power of. If you were in the president's shoes, what would you do? What do you think will be the right thing to do right now?
I'll tell you what I would have done. One more meeting wouldn't do any harm with a larger committee of elders from Rivers State, and let them be there to hear the arguments of both sides. So that by the time you say, look, if you can't check yourselves, I may have to take a more drastic decision, the whole world will know that you tried very hard. On the other hand, I know a president is a person under superhuman pressure. And having met with them once, and the matter didn't go well, he opted for what appears to be the immediate solution. On the other hand, the fact that one is an appointee of his and the other is an elected person makes it unfair to remove the one you didn't appoint and do nothing about the one you appointed. I think that's one of the arguments that people are putting forward. But in future, elders, party members should be able to get involved in dealing with these matters.
Let me quickly, so I will wrap up this and go into what I regard as even a more serious matter, because it's a matter that involves how we can secure this country. You worked closely with former President Obasanjo, and whatever happened between the 4 or 5 years that you were chairman of the People's Democratic Party, looking back, and years later, this same section is still haunting us. And some of the intentions of the drafters of the Constitution and those things they left out are still haunting us. And that those who are afraid of what a more autocratic leader could use the Section 305 to do. With the benefit of hindsight, Chief, how do we be tonight? What would you consider perhaps a regret in this sense when you were at that level as a PDP chair, and what happened in governance and in government when President Obasanjo was in office, vis-a-vis what we are seeing today? What do you think we need to correct urgently?
Well, if certain sections of the Constitution are beginning to show themselves as problematic, we should begin to think of constitutional amendment. Because the only forum that can handle that is the National Assembly. People should submit memoranda and to say to ourselves, well, is this fair or just? On the other hand, do we just leave it as it is, hoping that the president will always be fair and balanced in his decisions? Like I said, a president is a man or woman under terrible pressure. However, removing somebody who was elected by an entire state by a sentence of one individual elsewhere may look a bit tricky, and not to say unjust. So it's something that Nigeria should begin to debate after this.
Chief Ogbe, today we understand that the administrator of Rivers State have officially resumed duty. He was in Port Harcourt and he landed, was received, and in being received is also the immediate pressure of hitting the ground running. And we saw him also being accompanied to the government house. In all of this is the fact that he says that the order of the president in restoring peace and order in the state is an urgent task for him. Let's take a listen to the administrator, Vice Admiral Abakete Ibas.
I have to talk to you guys. I want to thank you also for what you've been doing so far. You're all aware I just got in here and decided to meet with the head of service and the permanent secretaries and the service commanders. I'm going to have to meet with them to get the formal briefings from all those I met this afternoon. And then I believe it is only proper for me thereafter to have something to say to you all. And I assure you that perhaps later this evening I'll be in the right position to address you and then to address the issues that you may want to raise now. Port Harcourt is my city. Everything appears calm, and though I know that the situation is there, but we just want Port Harcourt to get back to where it has always been.
Shivadogbe, if you were to advise Vice Admiral Ibas, what would you be telling him tonight?
Well, he has an assignment. He should carry on quietly, listen to all sides, find out what the grievances are, and be fair and just as far as is humanly possible. The only other thing that I'm asking is, why is it that each time there is this suspension of a governor, a military person is put back in place? Do we miss military rule? Or are we suggesting that civilians are incapable of governing themselves? Obasanjo did it twice, in fact thrice, and we have it again. What's the logic? Which is why, in the first place, this whole imposition of a state of emergency should be avoided. It was not done in Borno State during Boko Haram, even though to every sense and degree, the situation there was far more chaotic than we have now, when Boko Haram was running riot. So that's all. But it's up to the president. And since the Constitution doesn't say you can only pick this or that person, the president is free to do so. But it's also sending a funny signal that civilians can't do the job themselves. And that's not a good one. And that's why civilians themselves should be more responsible. Elected individuals should behave themselves and not carry on as if it's a holiday and that they can do as they wish, because they are sending the wrong signal to society. If you are elected, be humble. If you are appointed, be humble. If you are an appointed person in a cabinet, you're primarily a public relations officer. Behave yourself. Don't engage in warfare because it may give you the kicks. It's not right. And there's no reason why individuals in a state cannot get together, iron out problems. We had this challenge. I was chairman. It wasn't easy because on each occasion, the decisions were taken. You were not always told what was going to happen. And then we tried to patch it up. I went to each of these states after the suspensions, and the tension was very high, but somehow we managed to calm it down. It's not something that should happen too often.
Thank you. There are those who are of the opinion that these are some of the kind of situation that makes a Nigerian president perhaps one of the most powerful single individual in the world because of the kind of powers they are available to them, are made available to them by the Constitution. Thanks so much, Chief Aduogbe, on this matter. But as a farmer and a former Minister of Agriculture, there is one matter that I'd love you to intervene on. And 7 years ago, a deal that was signed is now finally coming to effect. The federal government signed the Green Imperative Project Agreement with Brazil, which will see the South American country invest about $8 billion in Nigeria's agricultural sector. The agreement was signed during a meeting chaired by Vice President Kashim Shettima and attended by a delegation from Brazil led by the Brazilian ambassador to Nigeria, Carlos Gazzetti. The Minister of State for Agriculture, Abdullah Shabi, Minister of Finance, Wale Edu, and governors of Benue and Jigawa states were among those who are present. Now, don't forget, 7 years ago, this deal was signed. And it was the man that is my guest tonight that signed the deal, Chief Aduogbe. Chief Aduogbe, you initiated this idea, if my memory serves me right. What was the intendment? What was exactly what you thought about when this idea of the Green Imperative Project concept came up?
Well, thank you very much. Very quickly, when I was sent to the ministry in 2015, I realized immediately that the country is facing or going to face very, very severe food problems in the not too distant future. First, the vast majority of farmers are small-scale village farmers, none of whom on his own or her own can manage 1 hectare of farmland. A hectare is a football field. No village farmer can handle 1 hectare of farmland. No village farmer can afford to hire a tractor. No village farmer can buy enough fertilizer, at least 15 to 20 bags of fertilizer, to fertilize 1 hectare of farmland. Therefore, no village farmer can actually produce enough food to eat with himself and his family and even sell the difference. And I predicted then that we're going to run into trouble with things like yams and maize and so on and so forth. The only thing we escaped was rice, because Dr. Adesina, who was minister before me, did a marvelous job with rice, and I followed when I came. Now, for this particular program, I have friends in Brazil. The governor of the state of Mato Grosso do Sul, which is one state in Brazil, bigger in size than Nigeria. Brazil is 9 times the size of Nigeria. Governor Maggi is the largest single soybean producer on planet Earth. His younger brother is the next. And so we built a relationship, and I said, I'm going to need your help in Brazil. You went through hunger one time, and you managed to get out of it. How did you do it? And he gave me the lowdown. And then we started talking. Can you help? We began negotiations and talks. We visited Brazil, went to Embrapa, their research institute, and by the time we came back, we met with the government officials, finance ministers, and so on in Brasilia, and then this idea came up. As you know, government is very slow. I didn't return to the cabinet in 2019, but those who came after me They did their best. Even now, the two ministers are working very hard. Luckily, we have signed the idea. What do we want to achieve? We want high-level agro activity in every local government of the country. Every local government. Machinery, maintenance, education of farmers, extension work, soil testing, all that should happen because, Sean, between you and me, we have challenges in future. If our population is increasing by 5 or 6 million children a month, we are getting into trouble. So we need to double up. Today, you can't really borrow from a bank to finance agri. You can't. No bank will give you money to do agriculture. 2, you don't have enough money to buy a tractor or rent one. 3, you don't have the right kind of seeds. 4, importation won't let you do anything because what you are importing is subsidized by other countries to boost their own economy. So we started this idea, and I thank God that it didn't fail. Finally, it has been signed. We're looking forward to the implementation because the local governments are not functioning. They are not functioning. I was in India in 2012. I went to the home state of the current Indian Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, the state of Gujarat. Believe me, Sean, I went to a local government. There were 1,000 factories in one local government. 1,000 industries in one local government, producing all kinds of things, most of them family industries, agriculture. India produces enough milk to satisfy 1.4 billion people. Milk. And we hear, it's like, really, we're talking of agri, the local governments aren't doing much. And I'm afraid the governors aren't particularly excited about the local governments either. They're not making them work.
But Chief Ogbe, let me ask you, and quickly, because I need to double the questions, and in this manner. The first layer of my question, Chief Ogbe, is this. What scared you the most as a farmer? You know so much about this country. And your generation are those who have benefited. You saw, literally, how this country was at its best, producing some major agricultural produce. And there are those who have come to this country, or who came to this country, who sampled some of this agricultural produce, took it to their countries, and it has become a mainstay for them. Go to Ethiopia, for example. Sesame, cocoa has become a major mainstay for them. What do we represent? But my question really is, what scared you the most in terms of statistics? When you were agri minister, perhaps as a farmer, the statistics and the data that you have, that you know, what scared you the most when we talk about food insecurity in this country?
First of all, our inability to grow food. 2, the dwindling population of rural farmers. 3, the penchant for reckless importation. I have made enemies on account of this. You must import certain things you can't produce. But when you decide that rather than produce, you export oil and gas, you use the money to ship in food, and that's a solution, you are committing suicide. Now, I have been in Holland. Every cow on a ranch, in fact in the EU, gets a subsidy of about €5 a day for feeding the cow to produce milk. Every cow on a ranch in Europe gets at least 50 liters of water per day. Every cow gets at least 10 kilograms of grass to eat. Our cows are roaming around here, and we're quite comfortable. When you say, let's ranch them, people will rise up in arms. They say, oh, you're trying to hand over their land to Fulanis. No. Your cows are the most unproductive cattle on planet Earth. Nothing to compare with Southern Africa.
But did you fear,
you just don't care for them.
Just for a moment, did you fear that at a point in time we may not be able to feed ourselves?
I did. Let me give you one example. 1980, I went to the governor of Benue State. I was deputy speaker, And I said to him, in another 10 years, we'll have serious problems with yams. And he asked me why. I said, Gowon's UPE, it's a very good idea. Every child should go to school. Once they finish primary school, they are educated. They're not coming back to take a hoe and cutlass and begin to make yam heaps. And exactly the same thing has happened. Now you can't buy yams. A tuber is 1,200, 1,500, because nobody is prepared to make you yam heaps anymore. So I went to NCAM, the National Center for Agri-Mechanization, spoke to the directors, and thank God, they have developed a plow that can make yam heaps. I was there about 2 months ago. So mechanization was dwindling. Interest rates have gotten too high for farmers, which in the earlier times when I was a little boy, even as deputy speaker, we borrowed for agri at 3%. Now we have leveled the whole field, and the bankers and brilliant economists don't want to hear about that, go and borrow. And I can't take a loan at 29 or 30% to do agriculture. It's not possible. And until that happens, some interest rate is worked out, we will never be able to produce enough.
But do you think that we have actually made a U-turn in a food insecurity journey and the recklessness that we have embarked upon as a people? Do you think that we're on a positive journey right now, or we are still on a negative turn?
I think the government is making efforts, but I think we need to do more work. The danger is huge. You see, there is no point dreaming of democracy if you have not built your economy. And you have not built your economy if you haven't fed your people. And let no theoretician from Harvard or Yale or Oxford preach anything negative to you. If your people can't feed well, don't ask them for loyalty. Don't ask them to appreciate the values of democracy. You are like inviting people to dinner, filling your own plate with choice meat and giving them empty plates. There's no way they'll be happy with you. The food problem is serious. That's why I congratulate this government now for finally bringing up the Brazilian program. And I'm happy that I hope that they're going to work on it and that we get along with it. We have the right to feed well. The worst side of it is we are not yet cultivating 5% of Nigeria's land mass. A country with 1 million hectares of land. When you drive or fly, look through the window downstairs. There's nothing growing. So what are we waiting for?
But let me ask you, and I'm worried about the propensity of derailing on very brilliant ideas. The idea of the Green Imperative Project is to ensure that localized agri-economy is being pushed. Yes. The worry for me is that there are lots and lots of beautiful ideas in the past, but they have not been followed through. That's my biggest worry. Perhaps, do you have a similar fear that I have of following through some of these?
I do. But thank God that this government has secured this lump sum. It's the biggest investment in agriculture in my living experience in Africa. I know that they will set up committees. The ministers there now are working hard. The government is, and I think the president is very committed. We've got to get down to work. It doesn't have to be business as usual. It's not about sending cash to the state to give to local governments. Investments must be made under strict supervision and results obtained. Look, today, Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, food inflation has been a major problem. We saw the government putting in place a Ministry of Livestock. Did we need that?
Yes.
Is that the right way to go? I mean, we have the Ministry of Agri. Why Ministry of Livestock?
Well, I guess the government is trying to say, look, we have the problem of managing livestock. Maybe we should create a ministry. I do not see how or why the Ministry of Agri couldn't have handled it. But the Ministry of Livestock is now in place. No quarrels. How are you going to manage it? These cows, I went to Pakistan. They had the same problem we have now with cattle roaming around, eating up people's crops and fighting. to the Pakistani-created cattle colonies. When I said so, my goodness, they said, oh, I had become a Fulani man who wanted to take all their land and colonize them. I said, it sounded very silly. There were ranches in the southwest, Akunu Ranch, created by Chief Awolowo. I've been there. I've gone to Ishain in the southwest. I mean, Ogun State. I've been around. We had ranches. They were not as properly catered for as possible. Do you know what is going on now? These cows are roaming around. Cows don't like to walk. They are very lazy animals. They are very heavy animals. They like to eat grass, drink water, and sit down. And cows have 2 or 3 stomachs. They send the food down, bring it back later, and chew it. But we are not feeding them well. We're not growing the kind of grass they need to eat. And grasses are available. When I said I was going to bring grasses from Brazil, I was abused by all sorts of two-penny critics saying I was speaking grammar. There are special grasses for cows with the right amino acids, proteins, and so on. And cows then eat them, give you the milk and the beef. Nigerian beef is one of the hardest in the world. But Lagos consumes 10,000 cows a day. So we are not producing enough cattle.
Yeah,
yes.
Chibadogbe, I just have 60 seconds to close this program. But I am of the opinion, in the little of economics that I study, that a nation cannot be a master of all. In our agricultural, economics, and business, we need to prioritize.
Yes.
If there is 1 or 2 products that we need to prioritize in the agribusiness, what would that be? How can we sufficiently feed ourselves and ensure food security under this government? We have just 60 seconds to go.
It's not that easy to select, but if we must, you have rice, you have yams, you have cassava, you have palm oil, right? Right? Those ones. And then, of course, wheat. I sent wheat from here to Sweden, to Norway once. They tested it and said Nigerian wheat was, to some extent, even better than wheat from Ukraine. But we have to irrigate. It's not that the farmers aren't prepared to, it's that we have never equipped them to grow the food. 2, the young boys have left the villages, they're all in the cities, into crime. And there's nothing we can do. They are not going to go and use hoe and cutlass to do farming in the village. 3, Saudi Arabia has been asking us to export goats to them. We can't grow enough goats. The point is, the local government system is not working. And number 2, many of the governors are not interested in agriculture.
All right.
And it is not the business of the federal government to farm in the states. They can't do it.
All right.
This is the issue.
Chief Audogbe, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much indeed for your time tonight. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir.
God bless you.
You understand that the new administrator in Rivers State has given a state broadcast. We'll be bringing you updates at the top of the hour on China Television News Track. But that's the beat that we can take tonight on the program. Thank you so much indeed, everyone, for watching. I'm Sean Akimaloe. God bless Nigeria.